Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Chloe. I'm the operations manager at V4TP. Today, we're very glad to have Cheryl as our guest speaker. So I want to tell you a little bit about Cheryl. So Cheryl is a former Canadian journalist who has spent the last 12 years as a communications specialist on forest protection and climate change for many international organizations. And in 2020, Cheryl launched an environmental children's book series called What the World Needs Now. So thank you so much, Cheryl, and she'll be sharing some of the workshop content with you today.
Thank you, Chloe, and hello to everybody. I'm zooming in from France and really happy to be joining you all today. I don't know how many we have on the call, but I'd love to know, Chloe, do we have time to find out who everybody is?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so could the videos go on and we meet everybody who's joined us today? Or is everybody a little bit shy?
The video or a little shy?
Yeah. We don't have, so I see we have, let's see. Yeah, so do we have 3 people joining us so far?
Yes.
Okay, all right, well, I guess if nobody wants to say a quick hello, we can just dive in. So as Chloe mentioned, I started an environmental children's book series in 2022, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about what that series is all about. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so we want to make sure, so let's go into this. Okay, so this is our workshop today. What we're going to do in this workshop is I'm going to talk a little bit about my book series, and then we'll read my book, What the World Needs Now, Bees, and we'll discover some amazing bees from around the world. And then we'll do a little coloring activity, and I'll take any questions that anybody has about publishing books or questions about bees or anything else. Happy to answer any other questions you may have. So my series of books is called What the World Needs Now, and so far there's 3 books in the series: What the World Needs Now, Bees, What the World Needs Now, Trees, and What the World Needs Now, Less Plastic. And it's an environmental children's book series that aims to connect the world's youngest book lovers to the importance of nature and our place in it. Each book in the series follows a friendly animal through its habitat, helping kids to learn about one thing the world needs now, be it more trees or bees or less plastic, to maintain a healthy planet. So we are going to be talking about, given the theme this year of Voices for the Planet, we're going to be talking about bees today. And my book, What the World Needs Now, Bees, is all about a friendly young black bear named Melly. And one of Melly's favorite things to do is eat. Me too. I love to eat. And I'm in a good country for that. France has really great food. And many of the delicious fruits Melly snacks on wouldn't grow without the help of some very important little forest creatures. So What the World Needs Now, Bees, is a book that explores the vital role that busy bees play in helping plants to grow the food people and animals love to eat. So from there, we're going to dive right into the reading of my book. And I think that, Chloe, there's a link that participants can click to get the e-copy, right, of the book?
Yes, I will be sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, in the chat box.
Okay, so feel free to click on that link and you can download the PDF book. You can do that now, or you can do that after. I've got the book pulled up here so we can read it together. So What the World Needs Now, Bees. And I wrote this story, you'll see my name there, by Cheryl Rosebush, and all of the illustrations are from a woman who took my words and illustrated pictures to go with them, and her name is Susanna Swobodova. So our story begins in the forests of Ontario, Canada. Canada is actually where I'm from. That's where I was born. It's a great, big, huge country. And where do you live? So I put a map in the book right here where you can trace wherever you live all the way to Ontario, Canada. And that's actually the province I'm from. I'm from right around where that little pin is. And that's where Melly is living. The other thing to look for in this book is look at this little guy. This is Melly's friend, Dash. And he's hidden on every page, so we can try to find Dash as we go. All right, into the story. So inside the vast, sprawling forests of Ontario, Canada, near the banks of a cool freshwater lake, lives a young black bear named Melly. Melly says, "Hi, welcome to Canada." And here's a little fact about Melly down in the corner. American black bears are medium-sized ursines. Ursine is another sort of fancy name for bear. And they live in forests across North America. You can find them in Alaska, Canada, the United States of America, and even as far south as northern Mexico. So they're all over North America. There are lots of things for Melly to do in the Canadian forest. Look, she's getting curious about a skunk. I don't know if you guys know what a skunk is, but a skunk, when it gets scared, sprays a really stinky smell into the air. And I've seen a few skunks when I was living in Canada, and I definitely always ran in the opposite direction. And dogs and other animals, especially when they're young animals, they're curious, too curious, in fact, about skunks, and they can get sprayed. Not fun. But what Melly likes to do most in the world is eat. And look, can we find Dash in this picture? I think I see him snoozing along, having a nap with Melly. All right, so what does Melly like to eat? Fruits, bugs, fish, roots, you name it, Melly eats it. Look at, she's even looking at this bumblebee nest. A bumblebee nest, my lucky day, she says. So forest fruits are an especially tasty treat for Melly. Depending on the season, she can find blackberries and blueberries, cherries, currants, raspberries, strawberries, just to name a few. And do you know which small forest creature Melly can thank for all of these delicious fruits? Why, busy, busy bees, of course. Bees spend most of their days gathering sweet, watery nectar from flowers. And it's all that buzzing around that helps plants to grow food. The nectar that honeybees bring back to their hive becomes the thick, sweet honey that people and bears like to eat. Look who we find hiding there in the, I think those are the blueberries. They could be currants as well. But all right, so when bees fly from flower to flower, they help to pollinate them. Melly says, pollinate? What does that mean? As she munches away on a yummy apple. And look who's there. There's Dash. Okay, so let's find out how bees pollinate. Inside a flower, dust-like pollen collects on the part of the flower called the stamen. You see the arrow pointing to the stamen. When that pollen gets sprinkled in the middle of a flower, called the pistil, see the pistil in the middle there? The flower is pollinated. And what that means is it can now make seeds that turn into the fruits and nuts and vegetables we eat. Some flowers only have stamen with pollen, and others only have pistils. So something needs to help pollen move from one flower to another. Something needs to help flowers pollinate. And that's where our busy, busy bees come in. And Melly says, so bees are pollen helpers. She's getting it. And look who's there right there in the flowers. There's Dash. That's right, Melly. When a bee is inside a flower collecting nectar, some of the bee's pollen sticks to the bee's body. And when that bee flies to the next flower, the pollen on its body sprinkles off in the flower's pistils. Now that flower is pollinated and ready to grow food. And look what Melly says. Good job, little bee. She's watching, she's learning just like us. Other creatures that help to pollinate plants include wasps, which are really close to bees. They're very, very similar. Other pollinators in nature are butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, fruit bats, ants, and beetles. These are all insects. These are all tiny little creatures that love to drink nectar. The minute they're in that flower, they're getting pollen on them to help pollinate. All right, so what's your favorite fruit? Does anybody want to tell me what their favorite fruit is? I know what mine is. Melly says, it's so hard to choose. I like them all. Me, it's cherries. I just love cherries. Does anybody else want to tell me what they love? No. Well, how about your favorite vegetable? There's a good chance most of the fresh food you like to eat wouldn't grow without busy, busy bees. Bees also help to pollinate the plants and trees that give us nuts, such as almonds and chestnuts, and even things like mustard seeds and chives. They pollinate so many things. Now, imagine if bees couldn't help pollinate anymore. That can happen for a few reasons. Sometimes people spray a poisonous liquid called pesticides on their gardens or crops to kill certain types of bugs. But that spray can also poison bees. And what does Melly say? She says, yuck, it sounds like pesticides could make us sick too. That's not good. And look, Dash looks a little bit worried too on her shoulder there. They're listening. Look at these bugs. Nobody looks particularly happy, huh? Now, pesticides is definitely not good news for a garden and all the insects inside. Air pollution from cars and factories is also a problem for bees. It can cover up the scent from flowers that bees follow to collect nectar. So if they can't smell where the flowers are, they can't pollinate them, right? So look what Melly's doing. Clear the air, bees coming through. She's trying to clear the air so the bees can smell their way to the flowers. And where's Dash? He's up here listening still. Is he up here in the corner? Oops. We'll zoom in on him. There he is. All right. So here's how we can all help bees to pollinate wherever we live. Instead of pesticides, we can use natural sprays on the plants that keep bugs away without killing them. To reduce air pollution, people can use their bikes instead of cars. And when it comes to those natural sprays, natural citrus oils from lemon, orange, or grapefruits are really good at repelling many kinds of bugs without poisoning them. So there's some good solutions. We don't always have to use pesticides. People can also plant flowers that are rich in nectar to give bees lots to eat. They can also plant flowers that bloom at different times of the year to help bees find nectar all year round, or almost all year round. I mean, hard to grow flowers outside in the winter, but otherwise. And Melly says, in my forest, bees love these pretty trillium flowers that bloom in spring. The trillium flower is the provincial flower of Ontario in Canada, so they're a protected flower. We're not allowed to pick those. The more bees there are, the more food we all have. Our meals and snacks wouldn't be nearly as delicious without them. So the next time you munch on your favorite fruit, nut, or vegetable, take a moment to say thanks to nature's busy, busy bees. And now we're going to look at some of these amazing bees from around the world, because there are many of them. And I've got a presentation. I've got some slides I'm going to show you where we can see the illustration and the real version. So we'll go back to this. So the first bee I want to talk about is this incredible Wallace's giant bee. This is an amazing one. I learned a lot, in fact. And actually, before I tell you about Wallace's giant bee, I'm going to tell you a little bit about bees around the world. So there are more than 20,000 different kinds of bees around the world. Bees live on every continent except Antarctica. Most bee species do not live together in hives, but rather prefer to nest alone in the ground or in hollow pieces of wood. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But let's look at these amazing bees. So this first one is Wallace's giant bee. This is the largest bee species in the world. Look how huge it is compared to the honeybee that's above, or that's a wasp. And it was named after the biologist Alfred Russel Wallace, who discovered this giant bee species in 1858 in Indonesia. I've been to Indonesia before. It is such a beautiful country. Wallace's giant bee is about the size of a human thumb, 4 times bigger than the average honeybee. And it scrapes the sticky resin from trees to build and protect its nest inside termite nests. So it builds its nest inside of a nest, inside of a tree. Smart. That sounds really nice and protected. Okay, so let's look at another type of bee. Again, this is not a bee that lives in a hive or a colony. It's not a social insect. It lives on its own. Carpenter bees make their nests by drilling. That's how they get their name, carpenter. They drill inside pieces of wood. Different types of carpenter bees are found in many countries around the world, but the biggest ones live in Southeast Asia and Singapore. So Southeast Asia and Singapore have lots of these carpenter bees. And how cool. They know how to drill into wood. It's amazing to me. And what I also find interesting about the carpenter bee is that the males don't sting. It's only the females that have a stinger, and it's the females that also are the ones who make the nest. That's in most bee species, actually. The mason bee, very cool. The mason bee, again, is not a social bee. It lives on its own near the ground. And mason bees get their name for their habitat. They're named for their habitat, and they use mud-like cement to build their nests, like a mason, using mud and cement to build walls and different types of things. This is what this type of bee does as well. Amazing. The leafcutter bee. So the leafcutter bee cuts up pieces of leaves to make their nest. That would be so cool to see in nature. If you ever see a bee cutting a leaf like that, you know it can only be one type of bee, the leafcutter bee. The mining bee builds its nest by digging underground tunnels. So this one really lives in the ground and definitely doesn't live in a nest, and this one doesn't make honey. In fact, honeybees are the only bee species that lives in a hive with queen, worker, and drone bees. So a lot of people think that all types of bees, here, what I'll do now is I'll come back on screen so we can chat a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to, yeah, can everybody see me? Yeah, so, okay, there we go. So yeah, a lot of people think when they think of bees, they think of honey, but in fact, there's only one species of bee that makes honey. It's the honeybee. And all other types of bees are either social bees, but they don't, their nectar, the nectar that they collect doesn't turn into the honey that we eat. But what is important about all species of bees and wasps is that they're pollinators, which is, like my book explains, what is so, so important for the food that we eat. And in a lot of ways, if we don't have enough bees and wasps and pollinators, we quite literally wouldn't have enough food. So it's also so important to maintain beautiful habitats for these beautiful, small and beautiful little creatures so that they can continue to do what they do, which is pollinate, and that we all benefit from. So what I would encourage everybody to do now, I think, Chloe, there's a little coloring sheet, right, that we had to share with everybody. Is that in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Okay, so there's a coloring sheet, and I've got this at the back of my book. It's a little activity page where, oh, that's not going to work with the virtual backgrounds. Maybe it will. Nope.
Only see the bear.
No, it doesn't. That's so funny. So I'll go back to sharing my screen because I've got it. I've got it in my presentation. There we go. And so if we go all the way to the end of my book, the end, we have an activity page. So Melly's forest is running out of flowers. Gather your most colorful pencils and crayons and draw some beautiful blossoms that the busy, busy bees can help to pollinate. So if you would like, if you're able to print this page out, you can print it out and start drawing away. Or else, if you can't print it out and you've got a couple of pencils and a piece of paper, you can start drawing a little bit. I might do the same while we chat about any questions you have about my books and bees. And we can just draw and chat at the same time. So I'll go back.
Cheryl, I actually have a question for you. So for children or their families, what can they do to help to protect bees? What are some of the ways that they can do or contribute?
So there's a couple of things, a couple of the most important things that families can do is, number one, they can plant flowers. So flowers that have nectar, and plant flowers that bloom at different points in the year. And so if bees can always be finding nectar, then they can stay alive and they can nourish their babies, and their babies will grow up to be bees that do the same thing. And so what we want to make sure is bees can always find nectar and have enough flowers. So it's about planting flowers that are nectar rich and good for bees, and also making sure that we're not spraying toxic sprays that can either poison the bee or kill the flowers that the bees rely on. So I would say of the two most important things that families can do, it's that really question what you're spraying. So when you go to a store and you find any sort of pesticide, really do a little bit more research than just grabbing the first bottle you can find, but really look for more natural sprays that are not going to poison a whole range of species and kill a whole range of different plants. And to look for flowers specifically that are really bee friendly. You know, I think a lot of people fear planting bee friendly or nectar rich flowers because they don't want a lot of bees around the house. They don't want to get stung. But the truth is that bees leave you alone. There are a couple of species of wasps that can get a little bit aggressive. Hornets is, yellow jacks, where they're more prone to bite or sting than a bee. But really, bees are gentle little creatures that, I've actually seen, there's a woman in the United States who is incredible. She just goes into beehives with her bare hands and has bees all over, and she never gets stung. So I think we've got this overblown fear also of getting stung by bees that we really don't need to have. And, it's a little bit like the chat about sharks, where we're so afraid of sharks when they can actually be so much more gentle than we think. And so, the advantage of having bees around far outweighs the disadvantage of having bees around, which is the tiny little chance you might get stung. That's okay. We can live with that tiny little chance if we know that we're going to have lots of nectar for these bees, and the bees are going to be able to do what they're born to do, just pollinate.
Fantastic. Yeah. Exactly. We need to be very careful of the products that we use that is, affecting the environment and bees. And
That's right.
Yeah, the video you mentioned, I actually saw it before. The lady, I think, helping them to move homes. And
Yeah.
I learned so much by watching those videos and learning about the queen bees and their importance. And it's just a very amazing structure that they have.
Yeah, it's amazing because, you know, there was so much I learned about bees when I was researching for this book. And I swear it was so hard to choose what to focus, you know, and include in this book, because I can't make a children's book that has 200 pages, right? That's not good for young kids. But the complexity of bees is something that can't be underestimated or overstated. There's even, I did some reading where I think this is specific to honeybees because they're a much more social insect, and they work together. They work together to raise their young. They work together to even find nectar in the first place. So the worker and the drone bees that leave the nest, in fact, I think the worker bee stays in the nest. The drone bee leaves, and drone bees have developed a way to communicate to each other by the way they flutter their wings and the direction in which, if they zigzag or if they fly straight, their patterns of flight signal to each other where there are nectar-rich flowers in the environment, in the vicinity, in the area. So they're incredibly complex creatures. And inside the hive, the complexity of the queen and how the queen is replaced, and how the babies, the eggs are tended to. It's unbelievable. No wonder there are bee specialists in the world, because I can, you know, after my research for this book, I understand how you could devote your whole life to the research of this creature. And thanks to all that complexity, and thanks to those modes of communication through flight and through their wings, that all helps to increase pollination. So fascinating. But what I chose for my book, of all the interesting things that I wanted to communicate to really young kids about bees, I thought what might be the most important to understand about bees is their connection to our lives, which is the food that we eat. And, you know, if we could understand the ways in which not only are bees fascinating in and of themselves, but what they do directly impacts our quality of living. Well, that to me is kind of the number one thing you need to know about bees. And then the rest is highly interesting, but I think it's the biggest motivator to help them if we understand how important they are to us.
That's interesting, and also reminds me of a movie. I think it's called Bee Movie. They actually, they have the different roles that you mentioned, the worker bees, and there's the queen bee, and it was depicted very funny in the movie.
Yeah. And that's the best way too, is to have a bit of humor when you're learning about these things, you know, and the whole point of my series is that, you know, it's just what all the kids, their first and number one job as kids is just to be curious, about these worlds and these ecosystems and all of these special creatures on the planet. Because if we understand them and we understand their role and importance, then we'll naturally want to protect them. And I know that's what Lumi Voce is all about. And that is definitely what my series is all about as well.
Beautifully said. We protect what we love, our tagline.
Exactly that. It's as simple as that.
Great.
We have a very quiet group today, Chloe.
I know. Sometimes we're a bit shy, but that's okay. Yeah, and then I know that you have a few other storybook that you also wrote. It's a series. So what other animals were featured in your story?
In the book, so there's lots of other creatures in this book. Do you want to talk about the creatures of Canada? That might be a good idea. Or do you want to talk about the creatures that are featured in the two other books?
Maybe just very quickly, like what are the two other books?
Yeah, so the two other books are, so the first book is all about the importance of trees. And that book takes us to Sumatra Island in Indonesia. And one of the most amazing creatures on the island of Sumatra are orangutans. And I particularly just think they're about the cutest creature on the planet. They're so interesting and they're so like us. They're one of the great apes, which are the 4 species on the planet. So the great apes are the gorillas, the bonobos, the orangutans, and the chimpanzees. Those are the 4 great ape species on the planet. And those are the ones that are most like humans, that are the closest to us in terms of on a whole wide range of things, right? And right down to our DNA. And orangutan, so Jeffrey is a young, curious orangutan in Indonesia, and he needs trees for a whole bunch of reasons. And it turns out we need trees for a lot of the same reasons as Jeffrey. So that's what that book's about, is we follow Jeffrey in the rainforest of Indonesia, and his little friend that's hidden on every page is a beautiful little lantern bug named Luna. So you've got to find her on every page of that book. And then my third book is What the World Needs Now, Less Plastic. We find ourselves in the North Pacific near the Hawaiian Islands with a young green sea turtle named Kalea. And Kalea lives in this most beautiful ocean habitat. But the ocean currents are sweeping in a problem with plastic. And there's more and more and more plastic pieces in her beautiful ocean habitat. And she's really not understanding why. So the book, Kalea follows along with us as we discover where all this plastic's coming from. Why do humans use so much plastic? And how we can reduce that, because we really need to. It's piling up all over the place, including in our oceans. And we really, really need to do something about that. We have to stop buying so much of it. That's the best solution, is just to not buy it in the first place. And then if we do need to buy it, what kind? Plastic items that last a bit longer, that we don't throw away after one use. Single-use plastics is a big problem. So through Kalea's journey in the ocean, we explore that problem and the solutions, because there's always solutions to be found for all of these problems. And just to understand that the way we consume, the way we buy things, has a direct link to the habitats around the world. And we have to understand that link. We have to understand that we're all connected, that whatever we do here on land affects the habitats on land and affects the habitats in the ocean. As big as this world can look and feel and seem, it's actually not. And that we're all very much connected in everything that we do, to people all the way around and species all the way around on the other side of the planet. We really need to feel that sense of connection. And if we're aware of it, and if we feel it, then again, we'll do things, we'll change the way we do things to live in a much more sustainable, respectful way. So those are the 3 books. And if we've got a little bit of time, Chloe, I'd be happy to go dive back into the bees book and discover a few of the creatures from Canada, if that could be of interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do that.
Okay, great. I'll share my screen again, and we'll go back into my book. Because it's true, we talked a lot about bees in the book, but there's also some really cool creatures in Canada that we can learn about as well. So here they are. So these are the amazing forest species of Ontario, Canada, because Canada is so big. In fact, you won't find these species everywhere in Canada, but for sure in Ontario, where Melly lives, you'll find these. So up here in the top left corner, you've got the Canada goose with that black and white head and sort of brown and white body. And they're really nice and big. And the Canada goose, they migrate in the winter. So they will leave in big flocks. You'll see them leaving in the fall to head down south. They'll go down to Florida and Mexico and then come back up. We've got the wolf, the beautiful wolf. And there aren't too many countries left that have wolves. Russia has a lot of wolves. And then the next country after Russia is Canada. And there are still big populations of wolves, thankfully, in Canada. And they're a complex creature as well, very social creature, working in packs, and they're very, very important for the ecosystem. They keep other species like deer and elk and that sort of thing just properly populated, not getting overpopulated. Of course, up here we have the chipmunk, Melly's friend Dash, that was hidden on every page. Chipmunks are really tiny, smaller than a squirrel in general, but they're everywhere. And I know that even when I take my family here in France back to Canada, they marvel at the chipmunks and the squirrels because we have so many of them. We've got that beautiful trillium flower that is Ontario's provincial flower, because Ontario is a very big province, where you can think of it as a state like the United States, but in Canada, we don't have states, we have provinces. And Ontario is one where this trillium flower is very important. The loon down there is also in the duck family. The loon is a black and white type of duck that makes the most beautiful sound. I encourage you after this workshop to go on YouTube and look up a video of a loon call. It's, to me, the most relaxing, peaceful sound. It always makes me feel like I'm back in Canada to listen to a loon. And they're very vocal in the morning and the evening. So as you wake up and as you go to bed, you hear the loon. It's beautiful. And you'll find them on the lakes. Canada has so many lakes, and they're typically found there. And then we have raccoons. Not sure if there are too many raccoons in Hong Kong, but Canada has lots of them. And they're notorious for going into garbage cans. So if you don't want your garbage spread all over your property the next day, you really have to bring in your garbage if you know that there's raccoons around, because they love to scavenge. And then, of course, we've got the big, majestic moose. They're incredible, and they're actually pretty rare to sight. They stay deep in the forest. And I would say of all my years in Canada, I maybe saw twice a moose when they came to sort of closer to the side of the road. But they're very, they were hunted a lot, and the populations are, I think, a little bit lower than they should be in Canada now. But they're far from being extinct. And I think there are protections in place now in Canada for them, and regulated hunting seasons and that sort of thing. We've got the brook trout up there. There's many species of trouts in Canada. The brook trout is one that we featured in this book, but that's a fish that we can eat, a freshwater fish that comes from the lakes. Of course, a deer. That hunting of the deer in Canada is regulated, and I think the populations are pretty much in a good balance or in control, depending on the area that you are in Canada. And then the skunk. I talked a little bit about the skunk before. I'm not sure exactly all the other countries that you can find a skunk, but I would venture a guess that maybe they aren't found too often in Hong Kong, Chloe, a skunk.
I saw it in Hong Kong before.
You did?
I don't think I see it before.
No, you haven't. No. So they look, I don't know what they would look like. They would look like maybe a cousin of a raccoon. But they're really famous for this big bushy tail at the back. And I think if you ever encounter one, they're very scared of humans. I mean, it's pretty rare to encounter one. But if you're really close to one and they're scared, you're going to want to run in the opposite direction. If you get sprayed by a skunk, it's so hard to get rid of the smell. And what's really strange in terms of a skunk remedy, but it's the only one that we know that really works, is you take a bath in tomato juice. How weird is that? Take a bath in tomato juice to get rid of the skunk smell, and apparently it's the only thing that works. Thank goodness I've never been sprayed by a skunk. But if you are, that is apparently what you have to do. And I know more common than anything is that family dogs and pets get sprayed by skunks because, like I said, if they're young and a little bit curious and they don't know what the species is, they'll be a little bit more playful than they should be with skunk and get sprayed. And I know a few families in Canada that had to dunk their dogs in tomato juice to get the smell off. It's the weirdest remedy. I'm sure there's some science to it in terms of the acidity of the tomato, or I don't know what. There's some magical property in tomato juice that is, I think, the only known cure. I say cure, just the treatment to get rid of that. Yeah, the remedy to get rid of that skunk smell. So that's a pretty unique creature, I would say, to Canada. There aren't skunks in France. I know that my French husband, was very curious about skunks when I told him about them. So yeah, and we live near a forest here in France. So yeah, I think they are. I mean, you definitely find them in the United States as well, but I think skunks are particularly rare.
I definitely smelled it before, but I've never seen them never seen them.
Yeah. That's common. That's common to smell it and you know one's around, but it could be within kilometers. It's unbelievable. It's a really wild creature. That was born with a very good defense.
Mechanism.
Yeah.
Almost weapon.
Exactly. So yeah, so I think that's it from my side. It's just, there's, like I said, there's so many things that we can talk about with bees, but that to me is a good place to start when it comes to pollination and understanding bees' connection to food. I'm happy to spend the last couple minutes taking any questions, but I don't know if we'll have any.
Well, if you're interested to learn more about Cheryl, we have her profile on the link that I just shared in the chat box. So you can go to her website and you can see more about Cheryl on there. And if you don't have any questions, then I think we'll conclude our workshop today. And before we go, I just want to remind you that we have another workshop on next Wednesday and Thursday. We will have marine biologist and a professor specialized in ant studies. They'll host a workshop for us on next Wednesday and Thursday. So please stay with us. It's the same Zoom link, same time. And if you want to see more detailed schedule or the recording of today's workshop, it will also be on our website. So hopefully see you guys again very soon. And thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. And yeah, like I said, we'll record this session and update on our website and social media. So thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.